Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. We'll call the joint meeting of the Emeryville City Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission to order and ask Nicole to take a roll call, please.
Okay, I'll go through council members first. Blake?
Here.
Carberry Montgomery?
Here.
Kroll?
Here.
McBurney?
Here.
Obrecht?
Here.
And we'll go through Planning and Zoning Commissioners Smith? Okay. Nicholas? Hatfield?
Yeah.
Racky?
Here.
Ralston Henson? Rothler?
Here.
Hollitz? Galante?
Here.
And Van Hoevelen?
Here.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll ask them for a motion and a second to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second, Carberry Montgomery.
Amy, did you move that?
Yes.
Motion by Kroll, second by Carberry Montgomery. Any further discussion? Roll call or voice vote, please, or roll call, Nicole?
Certainly. Kroll?
Yes.
Carberry Montgomery?
Yes.
Blake?
Yes.
McBurney?
Yes.
Obrecht?
Yes.
Hatfield?
Yes.
Racky? Rothler?
Yes.
Galante?
Yes.
Van Hoevelen?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. So we are here to have a report regarding the comprehensive plan existing conditions report, and who will be starting us off?
Mayor, thank you. I'd like to thank you, the council, and P&Z. We have Brandon Nolan and Daniel Teese from Household Levine on with us today, and they will present the existing conditions report and where we are going next in the comp plan process. So, Brandon, I will turn the floor to you, sir.
All right, thank you very much. And I'm going to have Daniel share screen while I chat here. So, Daniel, if you could pull up the PowerPoint.
Do you see my screen?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we're here to kind of give you an update on where we're at in the planning process, review the existing conditions report, and talk about kind of next steps, which includes a trip just in a couple weeks now to do some additional outreach and engagement around your sub areas, your focus areas. So we'll move on to the project overview. So again, we were with you all back in I think end of April. I think we were there for the first day of spring because we had just amazing weather, and then the skies opened up and it rained like buckets. So it was a pleasure to start the process off with you then. And we spent the last couple months kind of digesting what we heard from the community, wrapping up our existing conditions analysis, where we've done some kind of on the ground reconnaissance with staff when we were there in person, and spent the last few months working with our sub-consultant HDR to document existing conditions. So steps 1 and 2 were really kind of checked off, and the snapshot report was delivered to you all. You got the revised version, I think, about a week ago. So hopefully you had a chance to take a look at that report. But that's what we're doing kind of in step 3 of this process is really looking at where we at today and summarizing those data points. And moving into the fall here, just again in a couple of weeks, we'll be doing the visioning for those sub areas, really answering that question: where do we want to go as a community with those more detailed focus areas, and then working with you all to work through the sub areas over the next couple of months before we dive into kind of putting it all together into a plan document starting at the end of the year, and hopefully we're good for adoption in the spring. So we're about halfway through this planning process, a little less than halfway through. As we get through the engagement, we'll be at that halfway point. So again, kind of the engagement and what we've heard so far, you know, just a reminder of kind of the opening meeting. And I'm pointing very aggressively at someone in this image here, Daniel. It's great. But we had a department heads meeting, kind of meeting with staff to get their input on key issues and opportunity areas. Did the same workshop with you all in the evening. Had a morning workshop with some downtown groups, and then had a series of focus group and key person interviews throughout the couple days we were in town, and as well as some follow-up calls and conversations with folks. And then this is an image here. We're at the visioning workshop where we were talking about kind of community-wide kind of growth and development policy and vision for the future. And I think a couple of you from this group were also able to join at that meeting as well. And then we had pretty good participation as well online with our online questionnaire and then map.social. So the report details the responses in more detail, discusses responses in more detail, but pretty good representation with 300 responses on the online questionnaire, about 50 from map.social. So the report, again, kind of summarizes all of that in the community outreach section. If you go to the next slide, some of the key takeaways, things we heard kind of over and over again, some themes that emerged from these conversations. Really an emphasis on revitalizing Douglas Avenue, especially kind of the more eastern portion of the corridor. Some semblance of kind of recognizing that as part of what was the downtown kind of historically, and people want to see some reinvestment happening in that area. But also just in general, kind of a call for reinvestment in existing commercial areas throughout, including kind of key stretches of Douglas. People definitely want to see an increase in kind of commercial opportunities throughout the community as well, with an area of emphasis kind of in the western portion as you're growing, making sure that the services are kind of maintaining pace with those growth areas. And then kind of on the other side of the development coin from commercial development would be the housing discussion. There was, again, kind of general sentiment for a call for a wider range of housing options, a way of accommodating all lifestyles. So when it came to discussing kind of housing affordability or attainability, people really do want to see kind of a broader spectrum of price points represented, so you can find a house that suits your needs regardless of kind of where you're at in your kind of lifetime, or kind of just in general what incomes you're able to provide for housing. Multifamily was definitely a part of that discussion. So looking at ways of trying to avoid kind of more mono use or monolithic kind of development in the future, and incorporating multifamily development where you can in a context sensitive way. There's definitely, I think, a discussion of saying, hey, we want more housing types, but we want to make sure it's done in a way that kind of blends in a bit better. We don't want to have these isolated kind of complexes. That was part of the discussion during focus groups in particular. And again, the need to kind of balance infill with new development, just like with the commercial, looking at kind of how can we identify opportunities for new development within our established neighborhoods on the east side of town, and also looking at accommodating kind of growth, knowing that there's areas that can be kind of grown into on the west side of town. So having that balance moving forward. So some other key themes, getting away from land use. There's a general call to enhance your public transit, knowing that you're kind of on the kind of western edge of the transit kind of service area, seeing what can be done to extend service in certain areas or make service more frequent, to make it more reliable for people that need to rely on it on a regular basis. The recreation and trails amenities, I think everyone recognizes you guys have a tremendous network of open space and trails already. And that was really seen as a kind of a community asset, but people also wanted to see that strengthened. So there's gaps between some of your trails. There's areas that maybe trails could be extended to, and there's definitely kind of an undertone of let's keep going with this as a unique strength for Urbandale. A general call to improve community facilities and services. Again, as you're growing, making sure that the services are keeping pace with the size of town that you are. An idea that really came out in conversation was the need for some kind of community facility, your community center, especially on the east side of town. That came through in several conversations as kind of a service center that could provide kind of wraparound services for those in need. And then the Living History Farms was highlighted again as a unique asset that people want to see preserved. There's some discussion of, can it be restructured so we can take advantage of some of the commercial frontage that area has, at the same time recognizing it is a draw, it is a unique feature of Urbandale that people want to see kind of maintained as an asset over the long term. And then again, as we talk about growth, thoughtful annexation, so being fiscally responsible with the infrastructure extensions, making sure that as we grow in those areas, again, the discussion of annexation and growth always came back to also, hey, we want to make sure our services are out there too, so it's not just residential development. And then containing industrial uses, really I think that is kind of making sure that industrial areas you have are healthy and can provide for a variety of businesses you want. But folks don't want to see additional industrial expansion kind of in some of the annexation areas. They want to keep it kind of to the areas you already have and kind of doubling down on those areas. So those are kind of the things that came out of engagement. Those are the key themes we heard, and we tried to be responsive. There's a reason we do this at the front end of the process with all this engagement we did with you all over the first week, and then in the survey responses we were getting, is to really make sure that the existing conditions report we pulled together kind of tied in some of these themes, provided data about some of these issues, and tried to frame some of these topics. So the next section of this presentation, I'm going to let Daniel kind of lead the conversation. I'll be coming over the top with some commentary as well. But we're really documenting existing conditions, kind of that snapshot. Remember, the plan itself, over the course of this year-long process, we're answering 3 key questions. The first one is, where are we at today? The second is, how do we get there? And the third is, where do we want to go? And the second is, how do we get there? That first question, though, where are we at today? That's what this report really is meant to answer. So it provides that overview of those key issues and opportunities and gives you the baseline kind of understanding that we need to work from as we start talking about the future. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Daniel. And if you guys have questions, feel free to chime in. We'll try to pause at each section to see if there's any questions or concerns as we go. Hopefully, again, you've all had a chance to review that report. And with that said, it reminds me, I didn't pause at the end of my outreach review to see if there's any questions. So before we dive into the ECR presentation, any questions, comments regarding engagement summary and kind of the engagement that's been conducted to date?
Yes, one thought. Have you met with the board of Living History Farms about their future plans? I think they're planning some sort of an expansion to make it more of a year-round facility. And like you say, it's incredibly unique to Urbandale, 500 acres in the middle of Urbandale. And as I listen to people, they're clamoring for restaurants and recreation.
Right.
Would Living History Farms be an answer to some of that?
So I don't believe we've had a one-on-one with them. Correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, right? We didn't have that wasn't, yeah. So that's definitely something we could do. If I don't know if, John, if you have the contact information for that group, and we could do a follow-up conversation with them as a phone call. But we have not met with them one-on-one. It's mostly been through just researching the organization and hearing what other people had to say. So we can definitely do that. And then I think the retail, having more restaurants, having more retail, I think there's definitely interest in the community in seeing kind of what can be done with the frontage of Living Farms, either as part of Living Farms or maybe parcel it off, because I know they've sold property in the past, but kind of what can be done with that frontage to better activate it and take advantage of that area as a destination.
Or possibly even the northwest part, where there's a lot of undeveloped land along Douglas.
Yeah, great point. Yep, great point. Yeah, so to answer your question, we can definitely follow up with a conversation with them. If they're willing to have a call with us, we'd be happy to do so, because it has come up in multiple conversations. Any other questions on the outreach or engagement? Okay, so again, if anything pops up, feel free to chime in as we're going. We'll try to pause, and we're trying to be mindful of your time today, but want to have a conversation with you all. So Daniel's going to move forward with the existing conditions presentation, and we'll pause after each kind of component to see if there's any questions as we go.
Okay, thanks, Brandon. So All of you have we sent a copy of the existing conditions report to you all, I believe last week, and it covers a wide variety of areas. Like Brandon mentioned, the intent of this report is to create a baseline understanding of the city of Urbandale. And really, the intent of this meeting is to see whether we got that understanding right, or are there other factors that we need to do a deeper dive. So you can see here the table of contents. It covers from community snapshot, overview of the outreach, a review of the city's past plans and studies. It also do an inventory of the city's land use and development, your transportation system, your community facilities and infrastructure, parks and open space. And last but not least, as part of this comprehensive planning process, we're going to take a more detailed look into 3 of your focus areas, and that's the Plum North Park Drive corridors, the Douglas Parkway Avenue, and downtown Urbandale. So here's just a map of the regional context. City of Urbandale, located directly west of the city of Des Moines, with a great access to Interstate 35 and 80, easy access to a whole regional Des Moines metro area. It's also part of the urban loop, and that has been helpful in spurring a lot of investments in the central part of the city, where a lot of the employment, the industrial, and business parks uses are located. I want to go through just a couple of highlights of Community Snapshot. We took data from the U.S. Census, from the most recent decennial census, as well as from the American Community Survey 5-year estimates. One, like your population, city's population has been steadily increasing from 2010 and 2020, relatively on pace with other analyzed geographies. That's really Polk County, Dallas County, and the city of Des Moines. When we usually do these snapshots, we like to give some comparisons to other peer geographies, just to give a sense of regional context. With housing, about 78% of your housing stock is still single-family detached. And one of the recurring key themes we've heard from our outreach is, are there opportunities to increase the share of other types of housing, such as townhomes, multifamily. Your medium home value has also steadily increased over the past 10 years, and right now medium home value is about $250K. Income is also steadily increasing by 12.5%, and right now it's currently about 91K. Employment as well, it's been relative to the 2 counties and the city of Des Moines. It does have a lower unemployment rate, and with a steady increase in labor force participation. In addition to demographics, we also use CoStar to just kind of take a high-level view of the city's economic sector. So we looked at office, retail, industrial, and multifamily. The report contains a lot more details and nuances for each sector, but the key takeaway is, for office, it's been mostly stable even throughout the pandemic, and it exceeds the current national standards. So the current national standards is defined as a vacancy rate of approximately 20%. In Urbandale, it's approximately 12%, so that's pretty good. Your retail, even with COVID, the pandemic, it has still remained quite steady, and we're still seeing demand for additional retail and other types of commercial uses. Industrial, similar story. It is in great condition. Rent prices per square feet has gradually risen, and your vacancy rate has also been steadily decreasing. So that indicates there is a demand for your industrial use, for your business parks. Multifamily, the rent per square foot for your multifamily units has remained relatively stable. Your vacancy rate is also relatively lower compared to the city of Des Moines. Again, that shows that there is a demand and a good appetite for multifamily housing in the city of Urbandale.
And it's worth pointing out, these stats, I mean, it's not Urbandale specific because you're such a small market. So it's looking at the Des Moines Western Suburbs submarket within the data sources we're pulling from. So it's Urbandale as well as your neighbors in terms of overall market health.
Thanks, Brandon. I'll kind of talk through this section briefly, but again, part of the comprehensive planning process is examining the city's past plans. Want to make sure as we're beginning to draft planning recommendations, revision, preliminary goals and policies that it relates and builds on to some of this the city's past plans. So we took a look at your comprehensive plan, complete streets master plan, regional transit related plans, as was your plans pertaining to your community facilities such as police department, fire departments, and building on top of the previous parks plans that you currently have. Before I get into existing land use and development, any questions so far?
Yeah, so Daniel, this is Jeff. What kind of deep dive did you do talking about possibly having more multifamily and newer stock? Because we have multifamily, but we don't have a lot of new multifamily.
So the data really looks at current share of multifamily units per now. What we've noticed is that you're right, like a lot of the multifamily buildings the city has are built in more in a couple of years ago, more older, so like in the 90s or 80s. So when it comes to multifamily building, there are opportunities for newer housing typologies. But ultimately the U.S. Census data that we get is really just to provide a high-level overview in terms of like, what's going on with your current housing market, and are there opportunities to inform us of what kind of land uses we can recommend stronger in the comprehensive planning process. Thanks. Okay. I'll move on to land use and development. So what you're seeing here is an overall map of the existing land use. So this was generated through the city's land use data and confirmed when we're here in early April through field reconnaissance. The intent of this map is to show you, what is the existing land use patterns. So you can see in the middle, the central part by the interstate, it's mostly industrial, office uses, residential neighborhoods on the east side and west side of the interstate, and along Douglas, east of the interstate, and along 100th Street and 86th Street. These would be considered your major commercial corridors, also including Hickman Road too. In addition to examining existing land use, we also took a look of your current zoning districts. So this year really shows where the current zoning districts are. Ultimately, they are responsible for regulating and influencing development standards of your current developments. This is the part where we really want kind of talk more about in each of the sections in the existing conditions report, which are the key considerations. Each bullet point, you can consider them as kind of highlighting specific issues or opportunities in the city of Urbandale based on what we've heard in our research into the city so far. So starting off is downtown Urbandale. It's considered one of your older and core areas in your city. It has a streetscape, but it has been implemented a long time ago, and with what's going on with the possibility of a new arena and hotel development at the Merrill May, the mall site, there is an opportunity to establish a new and long-term vision for downtown Urbandale. What that is something the next stages of the comprehensive plan will further explore. At the same time, there's also possibility of a new city core, one at the intersection between 86th Street and Douglas Avenue. That's the intersection where you see a high level of traffic volume. That's also where the Civic Center, the city campus of city buildings are located. So as the city continues to grow west, would this intersection or somewhere further out west be the new city core? So that's something that would constitutes a key consideration in the comprehensive plan. Third places. So, your first place is where you live. Your second place is where you work. Third place is where you go out and socialize with your friends and your families. So think of restaurants, coffee shops, parks and plazas. And throughout our outreach process, we heard a lot about having third places, your commercial areas needing to have a more variety of different services and restaurants and places for people to gather, not only in downtown Urbandale, but in other neighborhood nodes. This also relates to neighborhoods west of the interstate where you have several commercial nodes at major intersections, but so far these nodes are primarily gas stations and convenience stores. So there are opportunities to add, to diversify the types of commercial uses in these nodes. That's something to be explored further. Growth strategies. The city already has an adjacency requirements to make sure that it's responsibly adding and expanding infrastructure to kind of control where development occurs. A higher citywide growth strategy can be helpful in preventing leapfrog development and giving a longer term strategy on how and where it wants to grow. Diversifying housing choices. Like we said earlier, the majority of housing products in Urbandale is primarily single family, detached. So where can we find opportunities from a policy standpoint to provide opportunities to increase single family attached duplexes, townhomes, quadplexes, and context sensitive multifamily apartments? That's something to be looked further.
Daniel, real quick. I just want to note that, so these are examples, I think, of things we're definitely going to be ferreting out as part of the comprehensive plan, right? These are kind of opportunities we see or issues we want to see addressed as part of this planning process, or at least letting the plan set the table for some additional analysis if it's too big of a kind of an apple to bite for the comprehensive plan. But so as we go through this, we're already starting to think of new analyses or maps or things we can do as part of the plan development to really help figure these issues out. So when Daniel's talking about the new city core issue or kind of trend, one of the things I've suggested to the team I want to see as part of the plan would be to show kind of a change in population center within the community over time. See where were people living in 2000 versus 2010 versus 2020. So you can see that the population of the city overall is kind of shifting slowly westward, and the natural center of population has shifted in the city. That's a kind of cool time series graphic we could show in the plan. And another example to get at the previous comment about the multifamily trend is like we can, try to highlight kind of where those opportunities within the housing kind of choice conversation, what are the data points we can call upon to help better illustrate this point. And I think looking at, again, time series change in housing stock to show kind of when multifamilies were built is another example of a data point we can kind of work into the plan to help address some of these concerns. So as you go through this, if there's anything you're thinking about or anything that kind of jogs in your brain as we're going through these issues, please let us know. I mean, this existing conditions report is the kind of that snapshot in time, but we also want to be able to tell a good story. So as we create the plan document, there'll be additional analyses we're undertaking that kind of builds on this first kind of baseline of information. So with that, I'll let Daniel keep going here.
Okay, thanks. Infill and redevelopment. Clearly, there's more development, greenfield development opportunities out in the west. However, in your core neighborhoods, there are still opportunities for infill development. When we think of diversifying housing products, there's one thing that's becoming more and more prevalent in different communities is missing middle housing. So again, like single-family attached buildings in the middle of single-family detached neighborhoods. Are there opportunities to incorporate such developments to further in existing neighborhoods to diversify the housing products? Living History Farms, an important asset to the community. In the past, it has sold part of its lands to development. On one hand, we're hearing that it should be continue to be preserved to remain as a important destination in the city. But there's also input and possibility of, are there ways that we can leverage the Living History Farms commercial frontage for additional developments. The North Park Plum Drive corridors, right by where the Interstate 35 and 80 makes the 90-degree bend, part of the urban loop, it represents the largest concentration of shovel-ready sites. So what is the vision for this area? And this is also part of one of the 3 focus areas the comprehensive plan will be taking a more detailed look into.
Right. So we have that outreach coming up in a couple weeks. And then this, just again, knowing that there's already a vision that was established previous for this area, kind of coming back to what's the new reality of work, right? I know this is a area of concentration for Aaron example. We've talked about this area a lot with him, about kind of what's the vision for this moving forward that we established in this plan. You saw the stats. I mean, 20% plus office vacancy rates doesn't jive necessarily, I think, with where the vision for these areas were in the past, right? So how do we reconcile that with kind of the industrial demand, with kind of the remote work situation? That's what we want to kind of reevaluate with this planning process. We might end up landing on something very similar to kind of what was initially envisioned, but we want to make sure we're going through the process to get there if that's where we end up. But we really need to make sure we're coming at these areas fresh. So.
Yeah, and related to the next point about expanding the employment base is one is looking through. Right now, most office and industrial uses are concentrated by the Interstate 35 and 80. You also have the office park on Meredith, Burgess Office Park. Should that continue to accommodate future growth with such uses? Should North Park Plum Drive continue to accommodate to be home of these such uses? That's something we need to look further into. And transitioning from industrial and office to commercial. So reinvest in commercial corridors. 100th and 86th Street are kind of your major commercial corridors with a high level of traffic. Are there opportunities to say adjust parking standards to promote more outlot development, play a stronger focus on perimeter landscaping to improve the corridor's visual appeal? That's a key consideration that we need to take account of. The next 4 bullet points are kind of related to the city's zoning ordinance. Just to be clear, the comprehensive plan does not involve a rewrite of this ordinance, but it can provide some recommendations on where specific parts of the ordinance that the city can consider when it chooses to undertake an actual update to its zoning code. So one is redundant districts. Some of your residential districts are really similar in terms of the intent and what kind of residential uses it permits. The majority of the difference is the difference in setbacks and density. So are there opportunities to consolidate them to create greater flexibility in design? Updated uses, some of the housing choices, so like single townhouses, duplexes, they're not explicitly permitted in the land use table, so that's something may need to be addressed in the future. Accessory uses, what is an accessory use? How can an accessory unit be retrofitted into other types of uses, such as granny flats? These are not explicitly explained in the code as well. And last but not least, it's more of a formatting issue on streamlining the format. So more specific details of development standards could potentially be located at the rear of the code, and more important, pertinent information located at the front end of the sections when it's introducing the intent of each zoning districts. Western neighborhood notes, kind of alluded earlier, is that you have west of the interstate, it's primarily more suburban style residential subdivisions. In your previous comprehensive plan, you established a strategy to have commercial nodes that are located 2 miles apart. Currently, they're mostly gas stations and convenience store. So one thing the comprehensive plan needs to evaluate is, should the city continue this strategy or go with a different kind of direction? For example, a more centralized entertainment district. That's something to be explored. Parking considerations. Parking is a necessary development component, but is it the right size for the city? Can it be adjusted to, still let commercial non-residential developments operate well to accommodate enough parking, yet provide enough room, extra land for outlot developments? And last but not least, along your major commercial corridors like Douglas Avenue east of the Interstate, 186th Street, and possibly Meredith Road, concentrating gentle density increases along these corridors, and as well as development nodes, whereas it transitions into more in the inside more of your single family detached neighborhoods. So these are kind of the key considerations for land use developments. Before we move on to the next sections, is there any questions?
One area, this is Brandon, if you can't see my talking head. One of the areas where we try to do a data dive and we want to come back to, I think as part of the planning process, is that Western Neighborhood Nodes issue. There definitely is a call for additional retail on the western side of town, and the question is kind of what's the best spot for that. Some of that's going to be decided by the fact that you already have existing development that's nearby, right? If you've got that target, the target kind of in the north side of town, that's going to dictate how much retail you can put proximate to that versus somewhere else. We did pull information, market area information for Hy-Vee is just an example chain for grocery stores, just to see what that market data looked like. And the market areas they have set, for example, for the Waukee location, looks like it would be kind of similar to maybe something that would happen on the northwest side of town. When you pull the demographics for those areas, you're getting really close to having enough support for some kind of local commercial center on the northwest side of town. So I think this is a good timing in terms of this process to really help to look into that data a bit further and identify maybe what the areas you want to double down on from a commercial standpoint is. But it is something we did look into a little bit further. It's not necessarily reflected in the report because we had some back and forth with staff on what information we want to include, but we have information that we gathered that we'll be building upon for later.
Thanks, Brandon. Any other questions before I move on? Okay. So the next section I want to kind of highlight about is the transportation of mobility. So here this overall map kind of takes inventory of the roadway net hierarchy and network here in Urbandale. So obviously your interstate and your primary arterials are Hickman, Douglas Avenue, and 86th Street. Your other minor arterials and major collectors are important roadways that helps connect various parts of the neighborhoods together. We also look at your transit network. Here it kind of shows the existing transit routes that exist and serve Urbandale. You also have an existing and a proposed DART Flex Connect zone. So that's kind of a on-demand paratransit service that connect you with a Uber or cab and guides you to a spot to get picked up by the DART paratransit services. And additionally, we kind of took inventory of the city's bicycle and pedestrian network, and the solid lines here kind of represents the robust and vast network of trails that's clearly an important asset to the city, as well as looking at where are additional planned trail facilities. So some go through the Living History Farms, the northwest side, as well as the eastern side where the core neighborhoods are located. Related to that, we also took a look at safety crash data between 2015 and 2021. And as you can see from the dots, most of the reported crash are located east of the existing rail lines. So that kind of shows as we're continuing to plan for transportation improvements, most of these crash points are typically occurred in intersections. So intersection design may play a role in addressing these safety issues. So when it comes to
Real quick, Daniel, just so everyone can follow along, in case you do have the full report in front of you, we've been going through each section by section, but the key considerations that we're going to spend a couple minutes on are on page 60 at the end of the transportation chapter. But overall, I mean, we're showing you some pages, and then others we'll try to make sure we're including some page references here. But page 60 will be this slide here.
Yeah, so key considerations. One is enhancing public transit. Kind of as Brandon alluded earlier, there was during outreach, there was a demand to expand public transit services. So thinking about, where are there opportunities for new transit routes or rerouting existing routes to better serve existing neighborhoods? That's something we'll take a deeper dive at. Access to Des Moines Metro, Urbandale is well connected to the region, especially with the presence of Interstate 35 and 80. How to leverage that into spurring additional investments into its employment areas. That's going to be an important element to look at in the comprehensive plan. That's similar to the next point with connecting Urbandale to the rest of the region. In addition to interstate access on how the local streets provide ready and safe access to individual businesses and facilitating safe freight route traffic. Walkability in downtown Urbandale. So that has been consistently cited as a main concern in downtown Urbandale, even though Douglas Avenue has custom streetscaping installed a while ago. Traffic speed is considered relatively fast over there. And what we've heard is that it doesn't feel safe to walk along on Douglas Avenue in downtown Urbandale. So are there opportunities to implement some sort of a traffic calming measures to slow down the traffic speed and make the area more inviting for pedestrians to walk through? Complete streets and trails. So the city has a complete streets policy, and that has been very helpful in ensuring future developments are providing the roadway designs are promoting a more multimodal environment. A multimodal environment means an environment where a person has access and choices to use different modes of transportation to get from point A to point B. Waterford Road remains a great example in the city where the city has used the complete streets policy to resurface and redo the road to make it more multimodal. Bicycle and pedestrian safety, kind of what you've seen with the vignette showing the little dots in the previous slide. A lot of them occurred at intersections. So intersection designs, roadway design will be a key concern and influencing factor in determining pedestrian and bicycle safety. We talked a lot about current transportation technologies, but thinking like long term, ultimately this is a comprehensive plan with at least a 10-year horizon. What are the emerging transportation technologies, ride-hailing services? How will they evolve? So it's important for the comprehensive plan to keep in mind of these emerging technologies and how they would impact the city's transportation infrastructure. Last but not least is just future freight routes. Most of your freight routes currently are along Hickman Road and the interstate. Are there, with the employment and industrial based, mostly in the center, is there a need for additional dedicated truck routes in that region? And that's something to be explored. Any questions regarding key considerations for transportation and mobility? Brandon, anything need to add? Or
no, just to add that this section, transportation and then infrastructure, which starts on page 61 of the report, HDR is our lead sub-consultant, and they're the prime authors for those. So if you do have any more detailed questions, we'll be sure to make sure they get them as well, but we can answer as best we can.
Okay. So after transportation, we're going to take a look at existing community facilities and infrastructure in Urbandale. So here on page 63, you're seeing a diagram showing the 6 school districts that covers Urbandale. And that's a lot. And one of the issues we've heard was, if you're living within the Waukee School District, you're technically inside Urbandale using Urbandale's municipal services, but residents tend to think that they are living in Waukee. So placemaking becomes kind of a issue here on affecting people's imagery on where they're located and which community they're associated with. Here, there's a map showing the existing government facilities, such as the City Hall, the Public Works Facility, fire stations, as well as the existing public and private school in the city of Urbandale. And here, starting at page 66, we kind of do a high-level inventory of the city's existing infrastructure. So the diagram here on the right kind of shows you the existing water mains. The red polygon shows areas without existing water services. Now, keep in mind, a lot of these red polygons, the larger ones on the western portion of the city, they're primarily undeveloped and agricultural lands. But what the intent of this diagram is trying to say is that if development were to occur in these areas, then an expansion of the water infrastructure or water mains will be necessary. A similar story to the city's wastewater and stormwater system. Generally, it's well built. Most areas, the majority of areas in the city are well served, and a lot of these color polygons where it lacks existing surfaces are mostly on the fringes of the city limits. If not, they're primarily undeveloped areas. And key considerations related to community facilities and infrastructure. One is the fire station relocation. So this is pertaining to the existing fire station in downtown Urbandale along Douglas. There has been talks and plans about potentially relocating this fire station further to the west, so it's more centrally located within the neighborhoods east of the Interstate 35 and 80. And this kind of, again, shows that as the city continues to grow towards the west, your population center starts to shift from the east and further to the west as well. Supporting future growth, kind of related to some of the land use points land use and development key considerations we've mentioned about growth strategies, future growth areas, ensuring that as the city expands, the infrastructure can continually to keep up and be able to serve current and future residents. Redevelopment opportunity, ultimately, it's not all greenfield development. Some of your redevelopment opportunity, for example, the Merle Hay Mall in downtown Urbandale and various infill and vacant sites within your core neighborhoods, they still represent redevelopment opportunities. And could they, depending on what needs are present for community facilities, should they be for redeveloped into private developments or additional community facilities? That's something to be considered. And kind of related to the school diagram that I showed you, the issue is that you have 6 school districts covering the city. So kind of like Waukee is that if you're within the Waukee School District, you thought you were living in Waukee, but you're actually living in the city of Urbandale. So strategies to include, say, gateway signages, public art, public plazas, additional third places to kind of better announce entry that you are in the city of Urbandale might be a potential strategy to address this issue. The last two bullet points are really pertaining to possible utility expansions. So expansion to the northwest, kind of mentioned this earlier too, is as future development occurs in the northwest part of the city, the city will need to expand some of its existing infrastructure, such as water, stormwater, and sewer lines. The Deer Creek neighborhood is specifically referring to the area by Merle Hay Road, near the northern edge of the city limits. That area has some topography issues, so expanding the water mains to that area might be a little bit difficult, but it's not saying that future development in that area is not possible. So that's more of a consideration to take into account of when considering future developments in that area. Any questions related to community facilities and infrastructure? Okay. Our second last section is take an inventory look at the city's existing parks and open space. For most, in this map, the blue polygons here represents the various service areas for each park. These service areas ranges from a quarter mile to half a mile, and these are based off from the city's current Parks and Open Space Master Plan. And the faint yellow polygons you see here represents existing residential areas. So on the east of the interstate, most residential areas are well served, except for the neighborhood that's directly located northeast of the Merle Hay Mall. Some gaps do exist on the residential neighborhoods west of the interstate, but technically they are covered by the Walnut Creek Regional Park, which has, I believe, at least a 1 mile service area, which is not shown in this map. So with that, the key considerations related to parks and open space. One is residential proximity to parks, ensuring that, as future development occurs in the city, they are accessible through multiple different modes of transportation to public or private parklands. The city's Parks, Open Space, and Recreation Master Plan has been invaluable in providing clear guidance on, where parklands are needed, what kind of facilities that the city needs. And as time progresses, it will be important to ensure the plan is continually updated as well. Trail connectivity, the city prides itself with having a robust network of trails, yet there are specific instances where there is a gap in trail. So addressing these gaps in trail will ensure the trail network is more connected and strengthened long term. Leverage latest and upcoming trends in park programming in undeveloped parks as the city grows. So this is, take for example, the Barrett Boson Park and Natural Playground. So that is a pretty good example of, a new park that is taking on emerging trends. So more natural, instead of your more plastic type playgrounds, you have a more natural playscape. So keeping in mind of what are the emerging trends in parklands and incorporating them into future park improvements could be a way to ensure, city parks continues to stay, very attractive and unique in the city and in the region. Entertainment and civic venue. This is something we've heard a lot from outreach participants, both from focus group interviews and the workshops, is that, can we have a central area where, there's shops, restaurants, entertainment, like theater, that, it's well known in the city and throughout the region. Are there opportunities for that? Could it be in downtown Urbandale? That is something the comprehensive plan will take a further look into. The last two is really related to maintaining what you have, ensuring they keep up with the pace of growth, and partnering with external agencies when it comes to securing grants and other potential funding sources to continually maintain and improve the existing city's park network. So any questions related to parks and open space? Okay. It's a lot of information, but this is the last section of the existing conditions report. So the previous sections have been focusing on the city of Urbandale as a whole. This year, what you're seeing, this map kind of shows the 3 focus areas that the comprehensive planning process will take a deeper dive at. One is the North Park Plum Drive, mostly the entire stretch of Douglas Parkway and Avenue from the western city limits to the edge of downtown Urbandale, and last but not least, downtown Urbandale. Again, these focus areas maps you're seeing here is kind of an inventory of what's going on in terms of land use and development and your transportation network that's happening in each of your focus areas. Similar to previous sections, we created a list of key considerations highlighting issues and opportunities for each focus areas. A little different because we're taking a more lower altitude view of each focus area. So we looked in terms of your land use, urban design and placemaking, and references to this focus area's transportation, infrastructures, and utilities. So the North Park Plum Drive, previously there was already a vision created for this focus area, and part of this planning process is to reevaluate that vision. Should it continue to be a business park and commercial destination, or should it be something else? And also considering the opportunities to incorporate housing, such as multifamily, within this focus areas, where tenants have closer access to the surrounding businesses. Urban design gateway features. So the best example is the intersection on 86th Street and North Park Drive, where you have perimeter landscaping and a gateway signage on the raised median. As the focus area gets developed, continuing that design throughout the whole corridor, it can be an effective strategy in kind of creating a unique identity to the area. And this kind of relates to street lighting, branding as well. Safe pedestrian connections. So far, the roadway itself is primarily roads with wider drive lanes. There are sidewalks at one side of the road, but there are some gaps. So filling these gaps in pedestrian connections is crucial. Transportation, infrastructure, utilities. Again, like this focus area represents the largest concentration of shovel-ready infrastructure, as well as land just ready to be developed at any time. Connection to the existing trail. There is a trail that's existing trail running by a creek to south of the focus area. Are there opportunities to make connections from Plum Drive to this trail? Any questions for the North Park Plum Drive?
Well, I just have a question.
Sure.
In general. These are all 3 of the focus areas are east-west, which I know that Urbandale's a rectangle, but there's nothing except at the intersection of Douglas and 86, for example, that has the north-south or northwest-southeast, thinking of Urbandale Avenue, included as a focus area. I just wondered how the decision was made and how many you decide need to be a focus area. I mean, I'm thinking of Urbandale anyway. That was one of the questions I had as I read the report.
Brandon, do you want to take on this one?
Well, and yeah, maybe staff can jump in, because the sub-areas were somewhat defined as part of the city's request for proposals. So when this was scoped, those 3 areas had already been identified. I think there was some discussion as we kick things off about kind of refining boundaries of those areas, but to our knowledge, I think those areas have always been kind of what was meant to be focused on for this process. So I don't know if John or anyone can provide any background about the selection of those out of the gate.
Yeah, Brendan, thank you. Yeah, it's a great question, and those were developed based on what we had heard from staff via the elected officials and from inside staff of places that we would want to take a deeper dive when we looked at the comp plan process. And so they were identified as kind of the commercial sectors, downtown as a place that people wanted to take a focus and look at. And then Douglas Avenue Parkway has been talked about as our main street. And so how could we best define that moving forward?
That's helpful. I obviously didn't read the RFQ, or I would have known the answer to my own question. That we don't forget there's potentials on the north-south corridors as well within the city, and whether there's potential to look at, obviously, at the intersections of Douglas and Urbandale, or Douglas and 86, or North Park and Plum Drive, if 86 comes up. But 86, as has been pointed out in the report, is one of the main, if not the main, east, north-south corridor in the city.
And we will be, as part of this comprehensive plan, because it is comprehensive, right, we will be looking at all commercial kind of corridors or key north-south routes. Just the focus areas are just that. They're areas where we're going to get kind of the next level of detail in terms of planning recommendations that even get to kind of the site planning kind of level. So we are definitely not going to ignore those other corridors. We are going to be providing kind of housing policy and commercial kind of policy guidance for those areas, but it will be kind of showing how that area ties into a bigger network rather than kind of focused right on the right of way.
Thank you. So the next focus area is the Douglas Parkway and Avenue. And as you can see, this is a long stretch of roadway. It's approximately about 8 miles long. So to better hone in like issues and opportunities and future key recommendations, what we did for this focus area is to divide the corridor into three sections, or some would call it functional sub-area, but it's really just a way to geographically organize the contents here. So we have the west that focuses the residential neighborhoods west of the interstate, the central that goes through the interstate and provides access to the city's existing business park area, and your east where it covers the intersection of Douglas and 86 and goes towards the western edge of the downtown Urbandale focus areas. In terms of, we do think these three, going back to this slide again, we do think these three sections have their own sets of unique characteristics. So that's part of the reasons why we kind of break this long corridor into three sections here. So the east one, land use, more residential in character. There may be potential at specific nodes at intersections, for example. There may be potential for higher density housing, such as single family attached or multifamily neighborhood node. Assuming city wants to move forward with the strategy of neighborhood nodes on every 2 miles apart, or the comprehensive plan identifies additional nodes in certain locations in this focus area, that can be an opportunity to incorporate non-residential land uses such as commercial within the Douglas Parkway corridor. Urban design and placemaking. The city has invested a lot of money and effort in kind of installing the raised medians along Douglas Parkway, and it's really created a nice and positive character along this corridor. And it's anticipated that this effort would continue to other sections of the Douglas Parkway Avenue corridor. Gateway opportunities to install a more substantial, probably like a monument sign perhaps, on the western limits to better announce entry into the city of Urbandale. When it comes to transportation and infrastructure, it's primarily related to filling up gaps in the sidewalk network and creating additional trail connections. So Douglas Parkway in the western section, it provides more connections on the non-motorized modes of transportation. The central section of Douglas Parkway and Avenue, more industrial and office use in nature. It also passes through Living History Farm. So again, are there opportunities for the Living History Farms to sell some of its lands along the Douglas Avenue for additional commercial or industrial development, or should it be preserved as it is right now? Workforce housing, really primarily think about housing for people who works nearby to give them a place for them to live with close access to their place of employment. This area could be opportunity for such developments. When it comes to urban design and placemaking, it's really more focused on the private realm, so amenities and employment base. So like within a larger scale industrial development, for example, are there opportunities to encourage developers to create like outdoor seating areas to make developments more attractive to employees? That's something worth exploring. Transportation infrastructure, once concerning with freight traffic, it's ready access to interstate. Freight traffic's mostly on freight truck routes are mostly on interstate and Hickman roads. Is it necessary to expand that further into the major arterials and local streets? Sidewalk gaps and north-south trail connections. Gaps in the sidewalks exist, and there seems to be missing linkages on north-south trail connections. One of them possibly would be along Urbandale Drive. And then looking towards the eastern section of Douglas Avenue. So here the character changes from industrial office to be more the core residents going through core neighborhoods, the established neighborhoods in Urbandale. Like we mentioned earlier, there is a strong potential for a major commercial node at Douglas and 86th Street with to leverage the high volume of traffic over there. Where would the new the fire station be relocated? That may impact on that roadway design on Douglas Avenue. Incompatible uses, especially this section between downtown Urbandale and the intersection of Douglas Avenue and 86th Street. You see a lot of standalone, more smaller scale commercial uses that are they're located directly adjacent to existing residential neighborhoods. So these kinds of land use incompatibilities would be addressed in the subsequent focus area plans. Outlot development opportunities, recognizing that 86 and 100th Street are major commercial corridors. Are there policy strategies in place to promote outlot development to better use of existing lands, wayfinding public art, kind of potential placemaking strategies to give this section of the corridor a more unique identity? Overhead utility lines are prevalent in this area. So as future redevelopment occurs, are there opportunities to work with developers and property owners to bury overhead utility lines? Transportation infrastructure, again, similar to the previous, the other two sections, focus on expanding trail connections and calming traffic speeds, especially where Douglas Avenue approaches downtown Urbandale. Any questions on Douglas Parkway and Avenue before we move into the last focus area, which is downtown Urbandale?
Well, Justin, I'm sorry to have comments, but you were talking about outlots and Hy-Vee. Not too long ago, they expanded their parking lot because it was too small. I don't think there's really any outlot possibility. You're there at 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon, the parking lot's pretty full. That's just my personal perception, but
No, that's helpful to know. Thank you. So last but not least, we focus on downtown Urbandale. So land use, there is a possibility of a major redevelopment on the Merle Hay Mall with the Iowa Buccaneer and Hotel redevelopment. So depending on how that goes, it may be a catalyst for future redevelopment or a change in character in downtown Urbandale. Public gathering spaces, you have a lot of commercial corridors that are fronting Douglas Avenue, but it's either parking lots in between or alleyways or residential side streets. Are there areas where we can incorporate a public gathering space for people to gather around in downtown Urbandale? Transitional land uses. Kind of mentioned earlier, it's mostly commercial uses on Douglas, but once you get past these uses, it's immediately single-family detached. So as the area continues to change, as you have more redevelopment opportunities coming up, are there opportunities to, say, have a single-family townhouses in between the non-residential and existing residential neighborhoods? Streetscaping. This was installed on Douglas Avenue a while ago, and a lot of the existing features are becoming obsolete. Some are getting old. So, does it warrant a new update to the whole streetscaping palette on this section of Douglas Avenue? Auto-oriented building design. You still, despite being in downtown Urbandale, you do have a portion of buildings where the parking lot is located in front of the building, and that kind of hampers that pedestrian environment. Related to that is perimeter landscape, parking lot landscaping. A lot of these surface parking lots do not have perimeter landscaping, so from the visual perspective, it adversely impacts downtown Urbandale's character. Cross-access. Are there ways where you have two or multiple adjacent non-residential development? Can we do an access way in between their parking lots so it minimizes the curb cuts on Douglas Avenue? This is more of a traffic safety issue. Third place is similar to public gathering space, coffee shops, restaurants, plazas along in downtown Urbandale for people to gather. The transportation and infrastructure, one of the key issues downtown Urbandale faces the fast traffic speed on Douglas Avenue. Are there traffic calming measures that needs to be implemented to slow the traffic down to make the environment more attractive to pedestrians and bicyclists? Coordination with the city of Des Moines. Ultimately, the eastern part of edge of downtown Urbandale is the city of Des Moines. So whatever right-of-way changes you make on Douglas Avenue, it needs to be coordinated with the city of Des Moines. Central parking locations. We mentioned about parking lots located in the front of developments. Is there an opportunity to explore the possibility of having a more centralized public parking lots that helps offset parking requirements from, say, nearby non-residential buildings? So these are things that the comprehensive plan can take a deeper dive in as we begin to draft the key recommendations, goals, and vision. So any questions for downtown Urbandale?
I will say that in talking with the kind of local business representatives in this area, there was definitely, I think, some excitement, some agreement around the idea of like a traffic calming and road diet kind of concept where you really take a hard look at how traffic flows through that area and seeing what areas of right of way can be kind of repurposed for bike and kind of more pedestrian amenities. So that's something we'll be looking at in more detail as part of the focus area discussion. But that was an area of kind of solid agreement among the group that we met with in terms of something that people were kind of excited about what potential that might hold for kind of improving the area as a kind of reinvigorated downtown. So.
So that was a lot of information. So we kind of went through all the sections here. I guess any other last questions pertaining to existing conditions report? If not, Brandon can give you a run through of, what are the next steps of this project. All right then.
Daniel, too, before we get to Brandon really quick, I will say if anyone has any questions that they think of in the next day or so, if they want to email those off, I can compile those and then get you off kind of the questions that may come up after as well.
Great.
I have one question for either Daniel or Brandon. Was there anything that really surprised you as you did your summary of Urbandale, did your inventory, any aha moments from a very big picture perspective?
To me, it was one of the most interesting parts of the community that I think data and things kind of confirmed is just kind of the east-west gradient is so solid, like kind of the transition in age of housing, the age of infrastructure, the difference in some of the issues that are occurring because you are an established community that still has this growth opportunity. So you've got kind of almost like a tale of two cities in terms of the concerns between east and west. So that's something that came through a lot in our conversations with folks. I think people still want to see collectively, obviously want to see the city thrive as a whole, but there's definitely different issues to address depending on where you live in the community because of that kind of the nature of your east-west kind of development pattern. So that's just kind of an interesting historic artifact that I thought, which is frankly unique to you guys, really. Yeah.
Kind of echo what Brandon said. The east-west divide was really striking when my colleague and I were driving around conducting field reconnaissance. You start off at downtown Urbandale, and when you drive on Douglas continually west, the character just changes and changes. So kind of we're thinking about key recommendations in the comprehensive plan, like trail, for example, recommendations for trails in areas west of the interstate may more focused on recreational bicycling, just for leisure, whereas in east of the interstate, it may focus more on both possibly recreational, but as well as commuting or access to other parts of the neighborhood.
Hi, this is Marcus. I guess the question I had, and I apologize if I maybe missed a portion where you highlighted this, but I understand your scope is just looking at Urbandale, but what about the surrounding areas or surrounding communities? How maybe that impacted your assessment, your understanding of the identity of Urbandale? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So how did kind of Urbandale's context influence kind of where you guys are at today? Is that kind of the...
Well, there's Urbandale, but just wondering about, say, the surrounding communities. I mean, if you think about where respective city centers are, where bike routes connect, or, a number of other factors. We're not sort of operating in a vacuum here.
Sure.
Community. How did maybe the look or feel or identity of our surrounding communities influence your assessment of Urbandale?
I think that piece was most kind of pertinent, or I guess most influential in our discussion when it came to kind of the Western growth area and talking about coordination with neighboring communities. That's definitely an area where kind of that multi-jurisdiction kind of viewpoint was more, I think, like I said, influential in how I think we interpreted things. I mean, we're not ignoring the fact that, the kind of eastern side of town is developed alongside everything that's happening along, I think Clive was thrown out there a lot, for example, in terms of the commercial context and having to compete with the interstate corridor and then the highway corridors that have already been developed in those areas. So from a commercial standpoint, people talked about, Clive a lot. From a residential standpoint, obviously talking about kind of the influence that Des Moines has on things and the kind of overall trends that are happening in the region was discussed. From a community character standpoint, I think we really did focus more on kind of what you have and what you guys are. rather than looking at what's happening next door. But there's definitely lots of initiatives that are happening across borders. The Merle Hay Mall redevelopment is a great example of, kind of a joint project that has kind of a regional impact, right? So we did look at it. If there's certain areas where you think it's really important, you think maybe we should kind of come back to, we can definitely discuss maybe areas where to focus our time as we move forward here. But I mean, it was definitely a part of our conversation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Good presentation and good questions. Anything further for the good of the order today?
Well, we can just discuss next steps briefly, like with one slide, and we can move on. So we do have the visioning workshops where are kind of scheduled, and we're working on making sure we have good attendance for the week of October 17th. So those are moving forward, having a series of kind of invite-only workshops as well as some general community workshops. And then coming out of that, we'll be looking also to present vision goals and kind of the preliminary land use framework that we're currently working on. So that's being pulled together based on everything we've talked about so far and the input we've gotten, and we'll be coupling that with these visioning workshops. So those are kind of two immediate next steps. And like I said, kind of going into the winter months, we'll be taking feedback from you all and from those visioning workshops to start working on actual planned content. So those are immediate next steps. And like John said, if you guys do have any questions, we know we gave this PDF to you in advance, but it is a lot of content. And we know you all have other lives to live besides just this meeting. So if you have questions about the 90-page report we sent you, we're happy to answer them following up this meeting. We guys just kind of route them through John, and he'll get us the input we need. So.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your participation today. Thank you to Hazel Levine for a great presentation on this. With that, I think we stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.